The galaxy stretched endlessly, a vast ocean of stars and mysteries, each system a tiny island in an incomprehensible void. Among the countless species and civilizations that thrived within this cosmic expanse, there were stories, old tales whispered in hushed tones, passed down through generations. Some were tales of wonder, of worlds teeming with life and beauty, while others were warnings, dark legends meant to instill fear. But there was one story that stood apart, a tale so ancient and shrouded in mystery that even the oldest civilizations debated its truth. It was the legend of the Edenites. The Edenites were said to have been a race unlike any other, a species of unparalleled determination and ambition. They burned brightly, expanding rapidly across the galaxy, forging alliances, and conquering worlds with relentless efficiency. Their hunger for growth, for dominance, seemed insatiable. Where the Edenites went, they left a trail of ash and submission. Entire civilizations bent a knee or were erased from existence. The elder species, the ancient powers that had watched over the galaxy for millennia, saw the Edenites not as conquerors, but as a threat, a wildfire that would consume everything if left unchecked. And so, they acted. No one knew the full extent of what happened, for the details were buried in the shadows of history. But the legend said that the elder species united in a desperate alliance to destroy the Edenites. Their fleets descended upon Edenite worlds like a storm, burning their cities, shattering their fleets, and silencing their voices. The Edenites, once feared as the masters of war, were brought to their knees. And then, they were gone. The elder species did more than destroy the Edenites, they erased them. Their name, their history, their very existence was purged from the records of the galaxy. Over time, the story faded into obscurity, dismissed as a cautionary tale. The Edenites became a ghostly warning, a fable told to fledgling civilizations about the dangers of unchecked ambition. For 1,000 years, the Zareth Dominion thrived in the absence of rivals. They were the rulers of the galaxy now, their empire stretching across hundreds of systems. Their fleets were vast and indomitable, their technology centuries ahead of any other species. They ruled with an iron grip, their dominance unquestioned. But the galaxy is vast, and even the most powerful empires cannot see everything. On the distant fringes of Zareth space, far from the bustling heart of the Dominion, something strange was detected. The Dominion's long-range sensors, ever vigilant, picked up an anomaly, a fleet of ships moving through the void. At first, the readings were dismissed as errors. The ships were unlike anything the Dominion had seen in centuries. They were old, battered, and scarred, their hulls marked by the passage of time and countless battles. The Dominion's analysts scoffed. Surely, these were scavengers or pirates, remnants of some forgotten warlord clinging to scraps of ancient technology. Still, protocol demanded caution. The Dominion dispatched a single warship, the Vilex, to investigate. The Vilex was a marvel of Zareth engineering, a sleek vessel bristling with weapons and shields. Its crew, seasoned veterans of countless skirmishes, laughed as they reviewed the data on the anomaly. The ships were primitive, crude constructions of metal and firepower, lacking the elegance and sophistication of Dominion design. As the Vilex approached the fleet, the Zareth crew grew bolder in their mockery. "Relics," one officer sneered. "They'll fall apart if we breathe on them." The Vilex hailed the unknown fleet, their message laced with the arrogance of a species that had never known fear. "This is the Dominion warship Vilex. Identify yourselves and prepare to be boarded." For a moment, there was only silence. The crew exchanged amused glances, already imagining the terrified faces of the scavengers they would capture. But then, a response crackled through the comms, a voice cold and unyielding. "We are the Edenites," it said. The words hung in the air, heavy with an authority that sent a chill through the bridge. "Surrender or be destroyed." The laughter died instantly. The crew of the Violix froze, their confidence replaced by a creeping unease. The Edenites were a myth, a story told to frighten children. They couldn't be real. And yet, as the battered fleet loomed closer, their weapons glowing faintly in the darkness, the Zareth crew began to wonder, what if the legends were true? Admiral Korak stood tall on the bridge of the Violix, his dark uniform pristine, his golden insignias gleaming under the dim lights. His crimson eyes glinted with amusement as he listened to the transmission from the unknown fleet. The voice of the so-called Edenites, calm, cold, and commanding, lingered in the air like the echo of a distant storm. Edenites, he repeated mockingly, his deep voice carrying across the bridge. A children's story, nothing more. Extinct for centuries, if they ever existed at all. The crew chuckled nervously, their confidence bolstered by the Admiral's unwavering tone. Around them, the hum of the Violix's engines filled the air, a low, steady reminder of the Dominion's technological supremacy. The ship was a fortress in space, a symbol of the Dominion's unchallenged power. Korak turned to his weapons officer, a smirk playing on his lips. Let's remind these scavengers who rules the galaxy. Open fire. Full barge. The order was met with swift obedience. The Violix unleashed its fury, a storm of plasma bolts streaking through the void like fiery comets. The bridge vibrated faintly as the weapons discharged, the crew watching with smug satisfaction as the glowing projectiles raced toward the enemy fleet. But then, something happened. The Edenite ships moved. Not in the sluggish, clumsy way one would expect of ancient vessels, but with a terrifying grace like predators stalking their prey. They darted through the plasma fire with impossible precision, their movements fluid and deliberate. Each ship seemed to anticipate the Dominion's attacks, twisting and turning in ways that defied logic. What? Korak's smirk faltered as he leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. How are they? Before he could finish, the Edenite fleet retaliated. Their weapons, though seemingly outdated, roared to life. Bright flashes of light erupted from their ships as kinetic slugs, massive, solid projectiles, were hurled through the void at staggering speeds. The first slug struck the Violix's shields with a thunderous impact, sending a shudder through the entire ship. The second pierced the shield entirely, slamming into the hull with devastating force. Alarms blared as the crews scrambled to assess the damage, their earlier confidence replaced by panic. Shields are failing, a technician shouted, his voice trembling. Impossible. Korak barked, his fists clenching. This ship is the pride of the Dominion. They are using primitive weapons. But primitive or not, the Edenite slugs were relentless. Each impact was precise, targeting critical systems with unnerving accuracy. The Violix, once a symbol of invincibility, began to falter. Fires erupted across the ship as explosions tore through its hull, the once pristine corridors now choked with smoke and debris. Korak's mind raced as he watched the battle unfold. The Edenite ships moved as if they were alive, weaving through the chaos with an intelligence that bordered on predatory instinct. They were not scavengers. They were not pirates. They were something far more dangerous. Retreat! Korak roared, his voice cutting through the chaos. All power to the engines. Get us out of here. But it was too late. The final blow came swiftly, a concentrated barrage from the Edenite fleet that tore through the Violix's core. The ship shuddered violently before succumbing to the void, its once mighty form reduced to a field of glowing debris. And then, silence. The Edenite fleet hovered in the aftermath, their battered ships untouched by the battle. They had suffered no losses, not a single scratch marring their ancient hulls. It was as if the Violix had been nothing more than a minor obstacle, a fleeting annoyance. Far away, on the Dominion's central command station, the news of the battle spread like wildfire. The destruction of the Vilex, the pride of the fleet, sent shockwaves through the Dominion's leadership. The whispers began almost immediately. The Edenites. They've returned. For centuries, the Edenites had been a myth, a cautionary tale told to warn against unchecked ambition. But now, the myth had become reality. And the galaxy would never be the same. The halls of the Dominion's central command pulsed with tension, a cold, suffocating weight that hung in the air like a storm about to break. Across the galaxy, the once unshakable Zereth Dominion was reeling. The destruction of the Vilex had been more than a military loss, it was a blow to their pride, a crack in the facade of their invincibility. In response, the Dominion did what it had always done when faced with opposition: it mobilized. The fleets of the Dominion surged from their strongholds, vast armadas of gleaming warships cutting through the void like blades. Their engines roared with the promise of destruction, their weapons primed to obliterate anything in their path. The Dominion would crush this so-called Edenite threat, just as they had crushed countless enemies before. But the Edenites were no ordinary enemy. At first, the Dominion's admirals were confident. The Edenite fleet, though formidable, was small compared to the endless waves of Dominion ships. They expected a swift and decisive victory, a show of force that would remind the galaxy of the Dominion's supremacy. Instead, they found chaos. The Edenites did not meet the Dominion in open battle. They did not defend territory or engage in prolonged sieges. They moved like shadows, striking where the Dominion was weakest and vanishing before retaliation could arrive. Supply lines were severed in the dead of night, entire convoys reduced to drifting wreckage. Fleets sent to reinforce distant colonies found themselves ambushed in the darkness, their ships torn apart by precise, unrelenting attacks. The Edenites fought with a precision and ferocity that defied understanding. "They are ghosts," one admiral muttered during a frantic strategy meeting. His voice was hollow, his hands trembling as he pointed to the scattered reports on the table before him. "They strike, and then they disappear. We can't track them. We can't predict them. They are everywhere and nowhere." The Dominion's admirals, so accustomed to victory, found themselves baffled. The Edenites fought with a purpose that was unlike anything they had encountered before. They did not seek to conquer worlds or claim resources. They fought not for wealth or power, but for something far more dangerous: vengeance. The realization spread like wildfire through the ranks of the Dominion's leadership. This was not a war for dominance. It was a reckoning. In the heart of the Dominion's capital, the Supreme Council convened in a chamber that seemed to echo with the weight of history. The room was vast and imposing, its walls carved from black stone, its high ceilings adorned with the banners of the Dominion's many victories. But now, those banners felt like hollow reminders of a past that was crumbling beneath their feet. At the head of the council sat Supreme Chancellor Ralvik, his face a mask of barely contained fury. His silver eyes burned as he slammed his fist against the table, the sound reverberating through the chamber like a thunderclap. "Enough," he roared, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the gathered officials. "We are the Dominion. We have ruled this galaxy for 1,000 years. And now, we are being humiliated by a fleet of relics? I want answers." The council fell silent, the weight of Ralvik's words pressing down on them. Slowly, one of the intelligence officers stepped forward, his face pale and drawn. He carried a thin, metallic tablet, its surface glowing faintly with data. "Chancellor," the officer began, his voice trembling. We've uncovered something. Something buried deep within the archives." Ralvik's eyes narrowed. "Speak." The officer hesitated, his gaze flickering to the other members of the council. Then, with a deep breath, he began. "Centuries ago, before the Dominion rose to power, Our ancestors were part of a coalition, a powerful alliance of species that sought to maintain order in the galaxy. He paused, his voice growing quieter. It was during this time that the Edenites emerged. The name sent a ripple through the council, a murmur of unease that Ralvik silenced with a sharp glare. The Edenites were unlike anything the coalition had encountered, the officer continued. Their ambition, their hunger for conquest, it was boundless. They expanded rapidly, consuming everything in their path. The coalition saw them as a threat to the balance of the galaxy, and so, they acted. Ralvik leaned forward, his voice low and dangerous. What did they do? The officer swallowed hard. They exterminated them. Entire worlds were burned, their cities reduced to ash. The coalition hunted the survivors to the edges of the galaxy, determined to erase the Edenites from existence. And they succeeded, or so they thought. The chamber fell into a heavy silence, the weight of the revelation settling over the council like a shroud. Ralvik's expression darkened, his hands clenching into fists. And now they've returned, he said, his voice a low growl. The officer nodded. Yes, Chancellor. The survivors and their descendants have come back. And they remember what was done to them. For the first time in his reign, Ralvik felt a flicker of something he had not experienced in decades, fear. The Edenites were not just an enemy. They were a reminder of the Dominion's darkest sins, a shadow from the past that had risen to exact its vengeance. As the council sat in stunned silence, the Chancellor's mind raced. The Dominion had always prided itself on its strength, its ability to crush any opposition. But now, they faced an enemy that could not be intimidated, could not be reasoned with. The Edenites had returned. And they would not stop until the galaxy remembered their name. Kalar 7, a sprawling industrial world, once pulsed with the mechanical heartbeat of the Dominion's empire. Its skies were choked with smoke from countless factories, its surface scarred by endless mines and refineries. The planet was a symbol of the Dominion's power, a vital cog in the machine of war, producing weapons, ships, and supplies that fueled their unyielding conquests. But now, Kalar 7 was silent. The first sign of the Edenites' arrival was the darkness. The planet's orbital defense grid, a web of satellites and automated turrets, went offline in an instant. One by one, the lights across the cities of Kalar 7 flickered and died, plunging the industrial world into an eerie shadow. The Dominion's forces scrambled to respond, their commanders barking orders into failing communication systems. Soldiers rushed to their positions, their boots pounding against steel floors as alarms blared through the air. But the enemy was already here. The Edenites struck like a storm. From the blackened skies, their dropships descended, sleek and silent, their hulls glinting faintly in the dim light of the planet's dying factories. As they landed, the ground trembled beneath their weight, sending shockwaves through the Dominion's defenses. And then, the Edenite soldiers emerged. They were clad in exosuits unlike anything the Dominion had ever seen, sleek, angular designs that seemed to hum with a faint, otherworldly energy. Their armor shimmered with a dark, iridescent sheen, as if it absorbed the light around them. Their visors glowed a cold, unfeeling blue, concealing their faces and giving them the appearance of spectral warriors. The Dominion's soldiers opened fire, their weapons lighting up the darkness with streaks of plasma. But the Edenites moved with inhuman speed, their exosuits propelling them forward in blurs of motion. They weaved through the barrage with terrifying precision, closing the distance between them and their enemies in seconds. The first wave of Dominion defenders fell without a sound. The Edenites fought with a ruthlessness that bordered on mechanical. Their weapons were brutal and efficient blades that cut through armor like paper, rifles that fired projectiles with bone-shattering force. They dismantled the Dominion's defenses piece by piece, their every movement calculated, their every strike lethal. In the chaos, the Dominion's commanders tried to regroup, to coordinate a counterattack. But the Edenites were everywhere. They struck from the shadows, appearing where they were least expected, their presence announced only by the faint hum of their exosuites and the screams of those who faced them. The battle for Kalar 7 was over before it had truly begun. As the last of the Dominion's forces fell, the Edenites swept through the planet's cities and factories, ensuring that no survivors remained. They left nothing behind, no witnesses, no prisoners. Only silence. When the Edenites had finished, they turned their attention to the planet itself. The once thriving industrial world, with its endless fields of machinery and towering refineries, was stripped bare. The Edenites dismantled the factories, tore down the mines, and destroyed the infrastructure that had made Kalar 7 a cornerstone of the Dominion's war machine. But they did not leave the planet in ruins. In the days that followed, strange structures began to rise from the ashes of Kalar 7. Towering spires of black metal pierced the sky, their surfaces etched with glowing, alien runes. The Edenites were not merely destroying the Dominion's legacy, they were replacing it with their own. The fall of Kalar 7 sent shockwaves through the Dominion. For centuries, their enemies had been rebels, pirates, and rival empires, foes that fought for territory, resources, or power. But the Edenites were different. They were not raiders or conquerors. They were reclaiming what had been taken from them. On the Dominion's capital world, news of Kalar 7's fall reached Supreme Chancellor Ralvik. He stood in his private chamber, staring at a holographic projection of the planet. The once bustling industrial world was now a stark, alien landscape, its skies dominated by the Edenites' towering spires. They left no one alive, one of his advisors reported, his voice trembling. Not a single survivor. Kalar 7 is gone. Ralvik's jaw tightened, his hands clenching into fists. For the first time in his reign, he felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on him. The Edenites were not just a threat to the Dominion's power, they were a reminder of its sins, a shadow of the past that had returned to haunt them. They didn't take the planet, Ralvik muttered, his voice low and filled with unease. They claimed it. Across the galaxy, the message was clear. The Edenites were not here to negotiate. They were not here to compromise. They were here to reclaim their place in the galaxy. And Kalar 7 was only the beginning. The galaxy trembled as the Edenites unleashed their fury. Planet after planet fell to their relentless advance, each world consumed by the same haunting silence that had overtaken Kalar 7. What once seemed unthinkable, the collapse of the mighty Zerith Dominion, was now whispered in the halls of power, a shadow creeping into the hearts of its leaders. In the Dominion's capital, fear festered like a wound. Supreme Chancellor Ralvik, a man once known for his unshakable resolve, now paced the grand chamber of the High Council with a restless energy. His silver hair, always immaculately kept, hung disheveled over his furrowed brow. His eyes, sharp and commanding in better days, now carried the weight of sleepless nights and mounting desperation. They are dismantling us, he growled, his voice low but filled with venom. Not just our armies, but the very foundation of our empire. They strike where it hurts most: our factories, our supply lines, our colonies. They are not just fighting a war. They are erasing us. Around him, the council members sat in uneasy silence, their faces pale, their robes heavy with the insignias of a power that now felt hollow. The Dominion had always been the predator, the unchallenged ruler of the galaxy. But now, they were prey. Ralvik slammed his fist onto the table, the sound echoing through the chamber like a gunshot. Deploy the Aegis fleet, he commanded, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Our most advanced warships. Every last one of them. If the Edenites want a war, we'll give them one they won't forget. The Aegis fleet was the pride of the Dominion's navy, a collection of warships so advanced that they were whispered about in reverence even among the Dominion's enemies. Their hulls were forged from alloys that could withstand the most devastating of weapons, their arsenals capable of leveling entire cities in a single strike. If anything could stop the Edenites, it was the Aegis fleet. But when the fleet met the Edenites in the cold void of space, the Dominion's hope turned to ash. The battle was over before it began. The Edenite fleet emerged from the darkness like rays, their ships sleek and angular, their surfaces glinting with an unnatural light. They moved with a precision that defied logic, their formations shifting and adapting as though guided by a single, unyielding will. The Dominion's warships unleashed their full might, filling the void with blinding streams of energy and thunderous explosions. But the Edenites danced through the chaos, their ships evading fire with an ease that bordered on mockery. And then they struck. The Edenite weapons were unlike anything the Dominion had encountered. Beams of searing light carved through the Dominion's ships as though they were made of glass. Projectiles, glowing with an eerie blue energy, pierced shields and hulls alike, detonating with a force that sent shockwaves rippling through the void. One by one, the Aegis fleet fell. In the aftermath, the Dominion's leadership was left in stunned silence. The Aegis fleet, their most powerful weapon, their last line of defense, had been reduced to drifting wreckage. The Edenites had not only defeated them, they had humiliated them. And still, the Edenites pressed on. Their war was total. They targeted the Dominion's infrastructure, striking at the heart of its power. Refineries were obliterated, their flames lighting up the night skies of distant worlds. Supply depots were reduced to smoldering craters, their contents scattered to the winds. Entire trade routes were severed, leaving colonies to starve in the darkness. The Dominion's empire, once a vast and unbreakable machine, was crumbling piece by piece. Desperation drove the Dominion to turn inward, seeking answers in the only place they had left, the Edenites' technology. In secret laboratories hidden deep beneath the surface of the capital, the Dominion's brightest minds worked tirelessly, dissecting the wreckage of Edenite ships and weapons recovered from the battlefield. What they discovered only deepened their fear. The Edenites had taken the ancient designs of their ancestors' designs thought lost to the sands of time and adapted them into something far beyond the Dominion's understanding. Their weapons, though deceptively simple in appearance, operated on principles that defied the Dominion's most advanced theories of physics. Their ships, sleek and elegant, were powered by an energy source that seemed inexhaustible, their engines capable of maneuvers that no Dominion vessel could match. "They are not just advanced," one scientist whispered, his voice trembling as he presented his findings to the council. "They've surpassed us in every way. Their technology isn't just a weapon, it's a statement. A reminder that they were here long before us, and that they've returned to take back what's theirs." Ralvik listened in silence, his face a mask of cold fury. The Edenites were not merely enemies. They were a force of nature, a storm that had been building for centuries, now unleashed upon the galaxy. "They fight without mercy," he said at last, his voice low and filled with a grim determination. "And so will we. If they want a reckoning, we'll give them one. We will not fall." But even as he spoke, the shadows of doubt crept into his mind. The Dominion was bleeding, its foundations cracking under the weight of the Edenites' onslaught. And for the first time, Ralvik wondered if the empire he had spent his life defending could survive the storm that was now upon them. The reckoning had begun. And the Dominion was running out of time. Zareth Prime, the jewel of the Dominion, was a world of gleaming spires and endless light. Its cities stretched to the heavens, their towers piercing the clouds like monuments to the Dominion's supremacy. The air was alive with the hum of activity, ships weaving through the skies, citizens bustling through the streets, and the ever-present glow of the Dominion's banners casting their crimson hue over the planet. But in a single night, that light began to dim. The attack came without warning. The Edenites, masters of stealth and subterfuge, descended upon Zareth Prime like shadows in the dark. Their stealth craft slipped past the planet's defenses undetected, their sleek forms gliding silently through the void. By the time the Dominion's orbital defense grid detected the intruders, it was already too late. Saboteurs infiltrated the planet's defense stations, their movements swift and silent. They moved like ghosts, bypassing security systems with ease, their presence marked only by the faint hum of their exosuites and the occasional flash of a blade. One by one, the orbital platforms fell under Edenite control. And then, the unthinkable happened. The Dominion's own weapons turned against them. Massive turrets, once aimed at the stars to repel invaders, swiveled downward, their barrels glowing with deadly energy. The sky above Zareth Prime erupted in chaos as the orbital defenses opened fire not on the Edenites, but on the Dominion's fleet. Ships that had stood as symbols of the Dominion's might were reduced to flaming wreckage, their remains raining down upon the capital like fiery meteors. The skies, once so bright and orderly, were now a storm of destruction. On the ground, the chaos was only beginning. Edenite shock troopers descended into the heart of the capital, their dropships cutting through the smoke-filled air. They moved with terrifying precision, their every step calculated, their every strike devastating. The streets of Zareth Prime, once bustling with life, became a battlefield. The troopers struck at the city's heart, its power plants, communication hubs, and supply depots. Explosions tore through the air, sending plumes of fire and smoke spiraling into the sky. The once proud capital was plunged into darkness, its towering spires now illuminated only by the flickering glow of flames. Citizens fled in panic, their screams echoing through the streets as the Edenites advanced. The Dominion's soldiers fought valiantly, but they were no match for the invaders. The Edenites moved like predators, their exosuites shimmering in the firelight, their weapons cutting through the Dominion's defenses with brutal efficiency. In the heart of the chaos, the Dominion's war chamber remained a bastion of order. The room was vast and imposing, its walls lined with holographic displays and maps of the galaxy. Chancellor Ralvik stood at the center, his face a mask of grim determination. Around him, his advisors barked orders, their voices rising above the distant thunder of explosions. "They've taken the orbital defenses," one of them reported, his voice trembling. "The fleet is gone." Ralvik's jaw tightened, his hands gripping the edge of the central console. He had always known the Edenites were dangerous, but this was something else. They weren't just attacking the Dominion. They were dismantling it, piece by piece. "There's only one option left," Ralvik said, his voice cold and steady. "Activate the planetary annihilation protocol." The room fell silent. The protocol was a last resort, a weapon of unimaginable destruction designed to ensure that if the Dominion ever fell, its enemies would fall with it. It would mean the end of Zareth Prime, the end of everything on the planet. "Sir," one of his advisors began, his voice hesitant, "if we activate the protocol, there will be no survivors. Millions of lives." Ralvik cut him off with a sharp glare. "Do you think the Edenites will spare us if we surrender? Do you think they'll show mercy? No. They've made their intentions clear. If we're going to die, we'll take them with us." He turned to the console, his fingers hovering over the activation panel. The room was heavy with tension, the weight of the decision pressing down on everyone present. But before Ralvik could give the order, the chamber doors exploded inward. The blast sent shards of metal and debris flying through the room, knocking several advisors to the ground. Smoke billowed through the doorway, and from the haze emerged a figure. An Edenite commander. He stepped into the room with an air of calm authority, his movements slow and deliberate. His armor, dark and sleek, seemed to absorb the light around him, and his visor glowed with an icy blue light. In his hand, he held a weapon that hummed softly, its blade shimmering with a faint, otherworldly energy. The Dominion's guards raised their weapons, but the commander raised a hand, and they froze. It wasn't fear that stopped them, it was something deeper, something primal. The presence of the Edenite was overwhelming, a quiet storm of power and purpose. Ralvik stared at the intruder, his face pale but defiant. "You dare to invade my chamber?" he spat. "Do you know who I am?" The Edenite commander tilted his head slightly, as if considering the question. Then, in a voice that was calm and steady, he spoke a single word. "Justice." The word hung in the air, heavy with meaning. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a declaration of war. It was a proclamation, a reminder of why the Edenites had come. Ralvik's hand hovered over the activation panel, his fingers trembling. For the first time, he felt the weight of his actions, the consequences of his empire's legacy. The Edenites weren't here for conquest. They were here to right the wrongs of the past, to reclaim what had been stolen from them. The room was silent, save for the distant sounds of battle echoing through the city. And in that silence, Ralvik realized the truth. The Dominion's time had come to an end. The fall of Zareth Prime was swift and absolute. By the time the first rays of dawn should have pierced the smoke-filled sky, the Dominion's capital was already a graveyard of shattered towers and burning streets. The once proud heart of the Empire lay broken, its spires reduced to twisted steel and crumbling stone. The air was thick with the acrid stench of ash and blood, a silent testament to the Edenites' wrath. In the grand halls of the Dominion's palace, where once decisions that shaped the galaxy had been made, silence reigned. The Dominion's leaders, those who had ruled through fear and iron, were brought to their knees. The Edenites made no speeches, gave no warnings. One by one, the chancellors, generals, and advisors were executed, their lifeless bodies left as grim reminders of the price of arrogance. Across the galaxy, the Dominion's fleets, once thought invincible, were reduced to scattered debris drifting in the void. The Edenite ships, sleek and unyielding, had swept through them like a scythe through dry grass. Entire armadas were obliterated before they could even mount a defense. The Dominion's war machine, which had once crushed countless civilizations under its heel, was no more. And then came the transmission. It echoed across the stars, carried to every corner of the galaxy, to every Dominion-controlled planet. The message was simple, yet it carried the weight of an era's end. The Zareth Dominion is no more. The Edenites have returned. The words were spoken in a calm, measured tone, but their impact was seismic. On every world, beings of countless species paused to listen, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear, hope, and disbelief. For those who had lived under the Dominion's rule, the message was a beacon of liberation. For those who had prospered under its shadow, it was a harbinger of chaos. But the Edenites did not stop there. They made their intentions clear. "We are not conquerors," the voice continued. "We have no desire to build an empire. We have come to deliver justice for the atrocities committed against our people. The sins of the Dominion have been answered." The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy in stunned silence. The Edenites had done what no one thought possible. They had brought the mighty Zareth Dominion to its knees. And yet, they claimed no throne, raised no banners. They were not here to rule. They were here to remind the galaxy of the consequences of cruelty, of the cost of unchecked power. Zareth Prime, the once glorious capital, was left in ruins. Its streets were silent now, save for the crackle of distant fires and the whispers of survivors picking through the rubble. The Dominion was no more, and the galaxy would never be the same. With the fall of the Dominion, the galaxy descended into chaos. The iron grip that had held countless worlds in submission was gone, leaving a vacuum that was quickly filled with both hope and turmoil. On some planets, the oppressed rose up in joyous rebellion, tearing down the symbols of their former oppressors. Statues of Dominion leaders were toppled, their faces shattered against the ground. Prisons were opened, and those who had been silenced for years stepped into the light, their voices rising in songs of freedom. But freedom, like war, came with a cost. On other worlds, the sudden collapse of order brought anarchy. Power-hungry factions emerged, fighting for control over the remnants of the Dominion's infrastructure. Cities burned as rival groups clashed in the streets, their battles fueled by old grudges and new ambitions. The galaxy, once united under the Dominion's banner, was now a patchwork of chaos and uncertainty. Amidst the turmoil, some planets began to rebuild. Leaders emerged from the ashes, rallying their people with promises of a brighter future. New alliances were forged, fragile yet hopeful, as species that had once been enemies sought to create a new era of cooperation. And through it all, the Edenites remained a shadowy presence. Their fleets, which had once darkened the skies of Zareth Prime, withdrew into the void. They did not linger to claim spoils or enforce their will. They vanished as quickly as they had arrived, leaving behind only the memory of their vengeance. But their absence was not a comfort. The Edenites had become a symbol, a reminder of what could happen to those who allowed power to corrupt, who built their empires on the suffering of others. Their shadow loomed over the galaxy, a silent warning that justice, though delayed, was inevitable. In the years that followed, their name became legend. Stories of the Edenites were whispered in the halls of power and around campfires on distant worlds. Some spoke of them with reverence, others with fear. But all agreed on one thing: the Edenites were watching. On a distant world, far from the ruins of Zareth Prime, a young alien child sat beneath a sky filled with stars. The child's eyes were wide with wonder as they gazed upward, their small hands clutching a worn blanket. Beside them sat an elder, their face lined with the wisdom of many years. "Elder," the child asked, their voice soft and curious, "will the Edenites ever return?" The elder was silent for a long moment, their gaze fixed on the heavens. The stars above seemed endless, their light cold and distant, yet filled with possibility. Finally, the elder spoke, their voice low and thoughtful. "Perhaps. But if they do, let us hope it is not for war." The child nodded, their eyes still fixed on the stars. In their heart, they felt a mixture of awe and unease. The Edenites were gone, but their presence lingered, like a distant storm on the horizon. And so, the galaxy began to heal, its scars a reminder of both its darkest days and its brightest hopes. The Edenites had come and gone, leaving behind a galaxy forever changed. Whether their return would bring peace or destruction, only time would tell.